morning. I'm Jen Ryan Brown, a member of this congregation and also a worship associate at the Unitarian Universalist Area Church at First Parish in Sherborne. Welcome to this loving community. Come in bringing all of who you are. We gather in worship, our hearts alive with hope that here we will be truly seen. Turn down the volume of your fears, remove your masks, and loosen the armor around your heart. May we root ourselves in the values of this faith: acceptance and encouragement, compassion and transcendence, justice and transformation. We strive not for perfection, but for authenticity and connection. We come here to learn about being in relationship together, to listen, to forgive, to be vulnerable, to create trust and have compassion for one another. We are gathered here to walk each other home. Be here in this moment. Let go and breathe.
Thank you. That was lovely. Good morning. I am Jason Mclin, the Ministerial Intern here. And I do want to say, if you're joining us for the first time, we give you an especially warm welcome. It's always wonderful to see new faces. I have just a few announcements this morning, too. GANS has their official opening this Wednesday, the 13th. Yes? Hey? It's such a wonderful indicator of our movement back towards being in proximity with one another, right? That what that represents, that GANS is up and running, and where people will be here. There'll be a bustle on Wednesdays, so that's exciting. And for those of you joining online, and if we could just give a wave back to those folks. Good morning. I suppose not just for people joining online, but this is an announcement for people that want to have prayers read during service that aren't going to be here. Dara has created a link that goes out in the weekly email for this purpose. You just click on that, and then that email will go to the three ministers here, just ensuring that one of us will get that prayer for that Sunday's service. So I wanted to make sure that we made special note of that, so that everyone that wants to have their prayers held by the group has that happen. And as is the tradition here, we now greet your neighbor. opening words for today are from Howard Thurman, his Meditations of the Heart, number 47, Give Me the Listening Ear. And they are adapted. I seek this day the ear that will not shrink from the word that holds up before me the image of myself, that causes me to pause and reconsider, the word that challenges me to deeper consecration and higher resolve. The word that lays bare needs that make my own days uneasy, that seizes upon every good, decent impulse of my nature, challenging it into paths of healing in the lives of others. Give me. I seek this day the disciplined mind, the disciplined heart, the disciplined life that makes my ear the focus of attention through which I may become mindful of expressions of life foreign to my own. I seek the stimulation that lifts me out of old ruts and established habits, which keep me conscious of myself, my needs, my personal interests. Give me the listening ear. Please now rise and body your spirit for our opening hymn, number 317, We Are Not Our Own. And as is the custom these days, we will hum these hymns. Thank you. I would now like to invite Arlen Tronton up to do our chalice lighting. Now, join in our covenant together.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another.
Okay, now is the time for the Wonder Box. So I invite any and all that wish to come forward and gather round for our Wonder Box. I say that knowing that as a kid, I don't know if I would have done that. But, I mean, I always think that. We're always like, hey, come on, everybody. And I think when I was a kid, I would have been like, you're crazy. Okay. So very good, very good. For you folks at home, you can't see them, but there are people down here. Just trust. Just trust. Okay. Yeah, nice. Well played. Yes, that's good. Okay. Okay, so who would, yes, come on up. Come on up here. Remind me of your name again.
June.
June. Would you like to open this up? Yeah, go ahead. Pull out there. Go ahead and pull that out. It's a stick. Okay. Exactly. So what I want to talk about today didn't really have an object to it, but I thought we should include that stick that fell during Reverend Nathan's Wonder Box. And he was like, oh no, we're not going to leave anyone behind. And I wanted to drive that point home. And also, since he's not here today, it's easy. Okay. All right, you go ahead and sit back down. So for the Wonder Box today, it's a bit of a continuation from last week. It's a bit of a two-parter. So last week we were talking about, I had the singing bell for those of you that were with us, and we were talking about what happens to us when we listen to a singing bell, our emotions, what happens in our bodies. And so today I thought we could do a quick exercise. So if everyone's willing, go ahead and stand up, everyone. If you're, and those who would like to remain seated, it's okay. The imagination is a powerful tool. You need not stand. But I once did this exercise where you can't worry and also put your focus on your feet. If we stand here and really try to put our feet on the floor and focus on our feet and then try to worry at the same time. Go ahead. I challenge you. Go ahead, give it a try. Give it a try. I mean, I have plenty of worries. Anyone? Anyone succeeding? Anyone still fretting? Because the idea, okay, that's good. We can sit down. The idea is that there's something about motion. There's something about movement that I think helps get the emotion out, right? So when you feel excited, anybody want to say what they feel like in their body when they get excited? Like jittery, like stomach kind of does maybe some knots. You kind of want to run around. Exactly. So there's something about that. So as we go on through the rest of our day, we'll just think about that. Think about what's happening in our bodies that corresponds with our emotions. Okay. So you can go ahead and return back to your seats. Thanks so much for coming up. You're going to be with us all day today. We feel super lucky about that. Yes, please, yes, go ahead. We are now going to have, Doug is going to talk to us about the Land Acknowledgement Task Force.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. On the eve of this Columbus Day, there is growing recognition in our country that indigenous peoples have had their land and culture taken and suppressed, and people of conscience have begun to address these injustices. Here at UUAC, we have started a Land Acknowledgement Task Force to do just that. You can see the names of our fabulous task force members on the screen behind me. They're all very committed individuals. The property on which our church sits was once the home of Native peoples. As we build relationships with local tribes, we will propose to you a land acknowledgement statement and other ways of demonstrating support and asking for reconciliation. Our faith calls us to renew our journey toward spiritual wholeness by striving to build a diverse and beloved community where all are equal. I found my own inspiration for this work, ironically enough, from a white Puritan man. His name is Daniel Gookin. My story starts with an intense curiosity around our local colonial history, and particularly around King Philip's War. This war was fought between the English settlers and several Native American tribes under the leadership of Mclin, or King Philip as he was known to the English. He was the sachem of the Wampanoags. The war began in 1675 and lasted for 14 months. By population, it remains the bloodiest and most savage war in American history. Thousands of lives were lost, houses were burned, and 12 entire towns were completely destroyed. The losses were most severe on the Native American side. More than half of the estimated 20,000 or so in southern New England either perished or were sold into slavery. Now back to Daniel Gookin. He was the government superintendent of the so-called Praying Indians. These were Native Americans who converted to the English ways of life and practiced Christianity. They created several settlements across Massachusetts, the most famous of which was right down the street in South Natick. Gookin worked closely with John Eliot, and together they supported and fiercely defended these Praying Indians throughout the war. The Praying Indians supported the English in the war, often putting their own lives at risk to help the cause. And for this, they were horribly persecuted by both sides. King Philip's followers saw them as traitors, and the English mistrusted them due to the color of their skin. As a result, the Praying Indians were rounded up during the war and sent to Deer Island in Boston Harbor, where hundreds would eventually be left to die of starvation and exposure to the bitter cold. But here's the interesting thing. Very little of this history would be known to us if Gookin had not written it down. He wrote in great detail about all the injustices and abuses by the English and sent his manuscript to his sponsors in England at the time to be published. They refused to do so, as it simply did not comport with the English narrative of the war at the time. It wasn't discovered for over 150 years, when it eventually made its way back to Worcester, Massachusetts, and was published in 1836. Daniel Gookin also has a strong connection to all of us. On Thursday, March 26, 1685, 10 years after the war, he sat in the pews of this very church to witness the ordination of his son as our very first minister. And that minister, also named Daniel Gookin, continued to preach to the Praying Indians in Natick, often take members of our congregation with him to do so. So all of this got me thinking, how much can we really trust about our history? Winston Churchill would later say that history is written by the victors, and that was especially true in this case. Has the real and full story of Native Americans been told? I don't think so. So as we celebrate the holiday tomorrow, let us reflect on this question of our history and our commitment to justice, a core principle of our church. For me, that commitment means I need to take responsibility to re-examine our history, to learn all I can about the true role of those who are not well represented in it, and to acknowledge and tell as much of their story as I can. That is what I hope to accomplish through this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug, for that, and introducing us into the members of the Land Acknowledgement Task Force as well. Thank you. So now is the time in our service when we draw near to our center, to ourselves. So be you here in the sanctuary or at home, take a moment to place your feet flat on the ground, take a few nurturing breaths, and give yourself to these moments of prayer, silence, and stillness. We will now have our call to prayer. What we need is here.
What we need is here. What we need is here. What we need is here. What we need is here. What we need is here. What we need is here. What we need is here. What we need is here.
Many of us carry with us today prayers for loved ones, the world we share, and prayers of joy and thanksgiving. We share the following prayers for loved ones. Morty Nickerson and her family as her dad enters hospice. For Dara, my brother Dave, who had a cardiac event. We also have a prayer for Amanda and Jeff Brown. Jeff writes, for our middle child, 10-year-old Lee, who was placed in a community-based acute treatment program at Boston Children's in Waltham this week. His parents, Sibs, Jonah, and Susanna, and dog Rafi, look forward to welcoming him home when he's ready. For all these prayers and the ones unsaid, we light a candle. We now turn our attention to the world. We have a prayer from Paulina that we find more power with and let go of the need for power over. We are also holding Texas in our hearts as the abortion ban law was reinstated. And we're also holding Lebanon in our thoughts as they go without power nationwide. The two grids that light that have gone out for days. For all these and those unspoken, we light a candle. And in times such as these, it's important that we also look to our joys, to our gratitudes. We have another from Paulina. This is a thanksgiving for the seasons. Each is there to remind us of our needs. The season of autumn, as we see the leaves change, it truly does remind us that the only constant is change, and that brings with it an immense amount of hope. So for all these joys that often go overlooked and inadvertently, we light a candle. Please now join me in the spirit of prayer. God of many names and no names, we seek to be in deeper relationship with life, in all its messy wondrous. There are so many joys and sorrows that go unnamed, but that are still held and should be held with great care. We then today give praise on this National Coming Out Day for all those that bravely live as their true selves. We hold them, and all those that will live in kind as a result of their courage. But we must also then hold those that find themselves in situations where it is not safe to openly be who they are, to love who they love. Spirit of life, we seek to try and hold the difficult history that is the history of this country. May we have humility as we continue to work to include those narratives that have long been left out of the discourse. For this, for all this, and the many joys and gifts we experience, we offer ourselves to the stillness. Our reading today is from the poet Antonio Machado, and it's entitled, "Is My Soul Asleep?" Is my soul asleep? Have those beehives that work in the night stopped? And the water wheel of thought, is it going around now, cups empty, carrying only shadows? No, my soul is not asleep. It is awake, wide awake. It neither sleeps nor dreams, but watches, its eyes wide open, far off things, and listens at the shores of the great silence. For our offering today, the recipient is NARF, the Native American Rights Fund. Tomorrow is Indigenous Peoples Day, and the proper naming of this holiday is but a small step in the direction of reparations. Were it that victories came faster and with greater ease, but until that day arrives, we must continue to support those doing the essential work of social justice. So to that end, as stated, our offering recipient is the Native American Rights Fund. NARF is a nonprofit organization which began their work in 1970 of, quote, providing specialized legal assistance to Native American tribes, organizations, and individuals nationwide. Additionally, NARF is, quote, governed by a Native American board of directors with 13 representatives from tribes representing the regions of the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii. Thank you so much for your generosity. As stated before, you can donate on Realm. The next slide will have, thank you, Dara, the QR code. You can hold your phone up to the QR code. They're also on the back of the order of service in your pew is the same QR code. But if you're not comfortable with technology, as I'm not, there is a plate at the back of the sanctuary if you would rather. And again, thank you so much for your generosity.
This is the sound of one voice, one spirit, one voice, the sound of one who makes a choice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of voices too. The sound of me singing with you, helping each other to make it through. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices three, singing together in harmony, surrendering to the mystery. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of all of us, singing with love and the will to trust. Leave the rest behind, it'll turn to dust. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of all This is the sound of one voice, one people, one voice, a song for every one of us. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice.
So here we are, the second Sunday in October, with the monthly theme being presence. I'm remembering that when the themes were initially being discussed, the word embodied was also included. And so I think the sense was that each word gave a little something that the other one didn't to the vibe, before it was sort of narrowed to presence. So if you indulge me, I'm going to go with both of those today. Because I think that there's a relationship between these two. I really love these words. I love them individually and together. Because I think that embodiment and presence, they realize one another. It's a bit of a cycle where each furthers and deepens the other. And I'll give you a quick example of what I mean. Before entering the time of prayer and meditation, just as we did today and as we have done now, we take a moment to place our feet on the floor, take a few deep breaths in an effort to ground ourselves so that we can be more present for the prayers of loved ones, the world, and our joys. We drop down into ourselves, embodied, so that we can be more present to what truly matters. But I suppose the next natural question, if you're anything like me, is how does this happen? How do I need to be reminded? How is it that when someone says, put your feet on the floor, it's only then I realize that my legs have been crossed for so long that one of them is asleep? Or when I look at pictures of myself, I'll think, do I always lean to the side like that? I was convinced I was standing straight. But so how is this? How does this happen? So Jeff Brown, in his lovely write-up of this month's theme, included a quote by Dan Millman, which states, "The mind is like a phantom that lives only in the past or the future. Its only power over you is to draw your attention out of the present." This is a great quote, and there's a lot there. We could spend many sermons talking about that whole quote. But for right now, I want to focus on his assertion that the mind draws a person from their present. Because I hear in this quote, this part of the quote, as saying that the mind, by its nature, draws a person up out of their body, creating a sort of dual existence. A neck up existence, very, very mind-centric, and a neck down existence, very body-centric. And I'm using the words body and present interchangeably here as a result of this sort of bifurcated existence. So this reality, we'll say, is either neck up way of living or neck down way of living. Because it sometimes feels like that, right? That our bodies are just a vehicle that sort of takes us from meeting to meeting or errand to errand. Because I actually think about this a lot, this neck up and neck down orientation. And that's for a lot of reasons, but certainly one of those is my previous job. It was the day before my 26th birthday when I was hired to play a Blue Man in the show Blue Man Group. I did warn you 2 weeks ago that I was going to talk about this a lot. And so you may not have believed me, but when you do something almost the entirety of your adult life, it has a way of leaving an impression. So, for those of you who haven't seen the show, the blue men do not speak, and the blue makeup acts as a sort of neutral mask, which is to say that the character doesn't use their face to tell the story that would otherwise be told with words. There's not a lot of emoting. So, now, it's a physical story, told physically and through music, essentially the neck down. Now, just like any story, specificity is paramount. So with a physical story, every move either helps to tell that story or muddies it. So I'll give you an example, and it's the Twinkie waggle. Now, again, if you haven't seen the show, there was a part where we brought a guest on stage to have a meal with us, and that meal consisted of Twinkies. So here we are. You have the guest seated here at this end, one blue man here, one second blue man, and then the third blue man. Now, the character had never encountered Twinkies before and didn't know how to get them out of the package or if that was even an option. But fortunately, the guest would open their Twinkie, getting the attention of the closest blue man, who would then, great, open mine. And now comes the part for the Twinkie waggle. And I should say that I was once part of a 3-hour workshop just on this one move. So just bear that in mind as we're talking about it, because the blue man now has the open Twinkie and wants to share this revelation with the other blue men. So the question becomes in the physical storytelling, where do you put the Twinkie to get their attention? Do you put it up here? Or do you put it down here? How much into their field of vision do you put it? Up here or down here? Any thoughts? Any guesses? Go on. Yes. Low or high? You think high? Great. Anyone for low? Anyone voting for low? Yes. Okay, we have some takers for low. Okay. We discovered that, because of course part of this is that the audience is writing their own story. That's sort of the idea, right? But when you put something up high, it feeds into that story of, mine's open, right? It's a little bit too close. Whereas if you go lower, it's a bit more innocuous. There's this thing, I don't know what it is. Hey, do you see this? So there's something about that, right? What are the implications relationally between those two differences? But now, through all this, 3-hour workshop aside, I don't want to linger too long with this, but you have to imagine in real time, because I don't want to neglect this relationship, this growing relationship. I mean, they did, after all, know how to open Twinkies. That's not someone to be ignored. So I'm holding, all the while, you sensing this person, this relationship, and this relationship, all from the neck down. Because that's where the data that I needed came from to tell the story. Because over time I learned that the body is the repository of emotion, and that's what connects us. So therefore that's the only data that mattered. And as it turns out, we get emotional data back much faster because it's already there. It's already in the viscera. I don't need to think about, is this happening? Is it? Right, the 3-hour workshop is when you think about this and this, not in the moment. If I were to think, is this right? Are they still with me? Are these people still with me? All of that, we've now moved beyond that because the answer is already there. Because if we think about it, whenever strong emotion comes over us, our bodies are probably telling us before we figured it out. Right? So in this moment, we were getting all the information we needed. So for example, I, when stressed or frustrated, get really thirsty. Now, I'd started to figure this out about myself, but the point was driven home a few years ago when my younger child said to me on one of these particular occasions, and I was really pounding a lot of water. So I must have been very frustrated. And this is what she says from the other room. You know, I can always tell when you're frustrated because you drink a lot of water. So that was a nugget of truth. I wasn't quite ready for, but so while you may not get thirsty, something happens, right? We cross our arms, we purse our lips, we sweat, we exhale loudly, our legs get antsy, the list goes on and on. But the data of our emotional life is always there, waiting to bring balance to what's going on from the neck up. Because it's not that we don't use our minds, right? Of course we do. I absolutely used my mind when I was doing the show, but I guess it's a question rather of when and how much. Because it's my sense that the mind gets called on way too much, to do way too many jobs. It's like we see the mind like one of those universal tools, you know, that has like a screwdriver and a knife, a bottle opener, sandpaper, you get the point. But eventually, even that universal tool has its limits. So my point in telling you all of this, of sharing this antidote from my days as a blue man, is that night to night, I was given the opportunity to practice living from the neck down, tasked with inhabiting the world of emotion and trying to connect. Let me say that again. Inhabiting the world of emotion and trying to connect. And that sounds a lot like what we're trying to do here. Leaning into our vulnerabilities as much as we can stand as we endeavor to unify these two halves of ourselves. I mean, isn't this the point of the spiritual life? Isn't that what's being asked of us? Isn't this what our faith is asking of us? Unification, to come at this life with our whole selves? Because I think if we're to meet the iniquities of the day, we're going to need to do it from a unified place. Because right here, within these walls, we as a community have two initiatives, the Eighth Principle and the Land Acknowledgement Task Force, which Doug told us about today. And these two initiatives, they're going to require both neck up and neck down living, but I think mostly neck down. Because even for those that are already heart-souled on this work, it's not easy. Experience tells me that we cannot read or think our way to equality alone. To be sure, it's important, it's crucial. I mean, as Doug shared, the learning that he can. I actually sat back here, and when he talked about that person then was ordained here, oh, wow, I mean, that's crucial information. But we must be cautious in our efforts to learn more and to do more, that we don't inadvertently leave our bodies behind. And so we make a start. The Land Acknowledgement Task Force is one start. And the other is that we become curious about what's going on in our bodies when thinking about the Eighth Principle or the Land Acknowledgement Task Force. What's happening for me? Do I feel ready for this? Do I welcome this? Or is it making me feel squirrely? Which is a technical term, squirrely. Because I think we need to be curious about what's going on from the neck down. So over the next few weeks, when realizing that strong emotion is afoot, try to follow the breadcrumbs all the way down and find out what you can discover. Because this being embodied, this being present to ourselves and to one another, it's remarkable. And it's no small thing. But that's what we're about. We aspire to hold all this, all the joy and the pain that brings about a more present life. And incidentally, I have begun to think it's humorous when I find myself ridiculously thirsty. But I want to say this. As you discover these things about yourself, these gems, don't hoard them. Share them with this community. Because in relationship, we are realized. Amen. And may it be so. Please stand, our body or spirit, For our final hymn, number 318, We Would Be One.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what is us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free.
Let us join in our call to ministry. We go forth into the world in peace, to act with works of love, to affirm each person's dignity, and to cherish the living earth. This is our charge, and it's aspirational. And so I ask that as you leave this place and go about your lives, each and every day, hold this community close to your heart as you endeavor to do these works with love and to affirm each person's dignity. And when you return next week, return as you are. Blessed be.